Well, like I said, today we're going to talk about content creation strategies. So basically, we're going to go over a few examples of types of shows that you can create in public television facilities, such as this one, and then kind of how you can create them. And then we'll also kind of, it'll be sort of interactive, so we're going to get you guys involved with it a little bit as well. So.
Right.
Cool, so what we'll cover. So focusing your show. Questions to ask yourself, which we'll get to that on the next slide. So basically there's kind of 4 main questions that you want to ask yourself when you're thinking about what type of show you want to create for public access. And kind of the main point that we're going to drill home today is to make something people want to watch. Because if, you know, it's public television, like Jeff said, there's no budget, but we have equipment here available for you to use. It's professional equipment, and you guys have the ability to make, you know, quality programming that could potentially, you know, show up on like TPT Channel 2 or something like that. That's just as good as anybody else. So we'll talk about, you know, different ways that you can create programming that people will want to watch. And that's always just something you want to kind of keep in mind as you're producing your stuff. So some of the formats that we'll talk about today are like talk show, reality show, live event. And then, you know, the delivery of your program. How do you want your story to be told? These are all things you want to kind of keep in mind when you're formulating ideas about your show. Do you want there to be hosts in your show? Do you want it to be involve interviews in your show? Do you want to do more of like a documentary style type of thing where you just do like interviews kind of out on the street, if you will? Are you going to have cover video, also known as B-roll? These are just, you know, things to keep in mind. The style. So, what is your video's brand? What type of energy does it have, or what type of energy could you bring to your show to make it something that people want to watch? Anything to add to that?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, all these things. And let's face it. In this era that we're living in. The things that people want to watch, it's rare when people sit down for 30 minutes anymore and watch a full episode, right? So you may want to consider doing shorter but very focused pieces on a specific issue that you could then post on social media, but you could also air on BCAT or SWTV, just as shorter segments, and if people catch it, great. But that's kind of where we're at. I don't know how to feel about it. It's just kind of the nature of where media is these days. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. And part of that, when we talk about what style is, what brand, when we were doing this, the energy a show brings greatly depends on your host. If your host is very monotonous and just kind of quiet, it may be more official, like type of interviewing, or I don't know if that's the right word, official interview. It may be lower energy, and bring just a different kind of vibe to the show. Whereas if you get somebody,
isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm just saying that it does bring a different style, right? And so part of the way to, and again, we're going to get into this a little bit more. Another way to make the energy come alive, if your host is kind of, lower energy, is your style of editing and your style of shooting. And that's where the creativity really comes in on producing programs or producing any type of video. Your editing, the pacing, do you hold on a shot for 10 seconds or do you cut? This is another just thought off the top of my head, but one of the things that Ben and I we've talked about this in other producers clubs, but the idea of action and reaction during a conversation. Sometimes it's okay to show the subject nodding their head and being engaged with the person that's talking. Sometimes it's okay to do the opposite and let the audio from an interviewer or interviewee keep going while you cut to the shot of the interviewer nodding and engaging. But that's a key part of video, is the action-reaction relationship. And that's tied to the whole idea of engagement. And so that's what you're really, I think, going for specifically with talk shows, which I'll get into. But anyway, keep going.
Cool.
Yeah.
So these are kind of the four main questions that we came up with. I mean, you don't have to follow this verbatim, but this is kind of the main four questions that we thought up that can help you sort of structure your show. So first of all, what is the show about? That one's, pretty obvious. What is the main content of your show? How do you want to structure or capture that show? Again, with do you want to shoot a whole bunch of different B-roll so that you can do these really quick cuts, or do you want it to be, mainly interviews, etc.? Why are you making the show? It's something that to ask yourself over and over again. Why are you making the show? Are you making it for entertainment? Do you want to make sure people know about a specific set of information? Are you making it just because you enjoy it? Whatever the reason may be, that will help you kind of get more or less involved with it, I guess, depending on where exactly you want to go with it. And then how big of a crew do you need to be able to actually capture what you're wanting to capture?
Yeah, the crew size thing is a big deal, like Jeff was mentioning. When you don't have a lot of people and you're a one-person show, which, I mean, I know I am, Ben is, I'm sure when he produces things for Bloomington, how can you get creative on your own? Is there, do you have to set up 4, still cameras at a wider angle and shooting in 4K so that later on in post you can mix up your shots and zoom in, zoom out, do that sort of stuff? And then the real thing I think that I'd like to focus on is, why am I making this? I really liked hearing some of your ideas. You're very focused, like suburbia and the development of it, or artisan bread making. That's so cool. I could envision that already, just thinking about, you have the shots of the process, but then maybe list the ingredients while you're doing it, so people are being entertained and they're learning something, right? Kind of neat. So yeah, okay. So let's jump in. Types of content. We're going to start off by talking about talk shows. So we all have seen talk shows. I mean, it's anything from The Late Show, right, Jimmy Kimmel, to something that's more local, like Democratic Visions or Republican Roundtable. They can be political, they can be faith-based, informational. Sometimes they can have like fun gags in between, that sort of stuff. And then going to that, what is the show about will really determine, in some ways, how you want to structure that show. The structure can be interviews where you're out in the field, or you're at someone's office or somewhere, and you interview them on camera, which is kind of the news style of shooting. Or you can be in studio here at BCAT, and you can set up 2 chairs and have a nice backdrop and have a conversation, and then use some sort of video to cover what you're talking about. So I'll walk you through that kind of structure. So if I'm doing an in-studio segment and I have a guest on and my host is talking about, let's see, somebody throw an idea at me. Has anybody got an idea for something that may be a controversial subject? Okay, here, I'll go there. Super Bowl spending. Maybe not everybody's so keen about tax money, going to fund the Super Bowl, and you want to talk with somebody about that. So you'd shoot that interview, have your host do their thing, listen really closely to what their subject is saying, or the interviewee. Then you'd go out and shoot video of that. So usually you'd shoot beforehand and then go out and get the B-roll to cover it, to focus on what they're talking about, right? So if they're talking about Super Bowl security surrounding US Bank Stadium, maybe you'll go out and get B-roll of all the gates up and the security guards and the Humvees that come in and out of the streets, stuff like that. That's all good B-roll. So let's move on though. Why am I making it? Again, is it for entertainment? Is this something like, if maybe you're doing a show about the latest gossip in Bloomington, oh, a scandal. I don't know, whatever you want to make. I'm throwing it out there. Or are you trying to target a specific group, like with Democratic Visions, if you're trying to reach people who are maybe more liberal-leaning, and you want to inform them about candidates that are coming up in an election or something like this? So it's important to know why you're doing that. And again, the crew size, really, you could do it with probably 1 or 2 people, depending on the structure of your show. So, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say, like with the crew size, like you said, like you could do shows here pretty easily with one person. As far as like the crew goes, essentially right now, Patty is our one crew person. We're the hosts of this event, and Patty is in there switching for us. And so we have the cameras set up here on lockdown. You know, they're not moving throughout this whole thing, so we don't need any camera people. But if you have enough people who are happy to help you with your show, and you have enough to have one or two camera people, you know, this is something we could talk about more as we kind of get into this a little bit more, but adding movement to your show helps a lot with the making it more interesting, more appealing to people. Instead of just, it's great to have 3 cameras that you can cut back and forth from, but if you've got somebody who's skilled enough with one of these cameras, maybe have them do a little like sweeping shot every now and then, or a slow zoom in or something like that. Something to add a little bit of movement, just to make the show more dynamic and more interesting. But again, these are things that you can think of ahead of time, or you know, even in like the control room, maybe you want somebody specifically dedicated to audio because you're going to have a band come in and you want them to sound really good. You know, make sure you have an audio person for that. Think of these things ahead of time, and you know, figure out how many crew you're going to need for your show to be able to pull those things off.
Right. And to add what Ben's talking about too, one of the things that, for instance, news shows do, they do these pre-made packages that they'll throw into a newscast, right? It's not like suddenly you're seeing live video of an event that happened 4 hours ago, right? They go back and assemble it. So one of the things that I encourage all of you to do is think of segments that are interesting, that may be just fun, that you want to put in there, and you can have your host introduce them. Like say on this week's, you know, getting to know statues, right? I'm sorry, I know that's really corny, but getting to know statues, and then you do a segment all about, and it could be 2 minutes, just on one statue that you thought was really neat and has a cool backstory. But it's pre-recorded, but your host can still interview or introduce it during your segment, which you record here. So that's another way you can mix it up.
It's called like a magazine show is usually what those
Yeah,
are.
magazine shows. Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of like what Democratic Vision is, which we'll see.
So, right, we're going to take a look. We wanted to show local producers and national producers. Not to like discourage you, Jeff, but it's, you know, we're being very honest. What national producers can afford and do versus what we can do at our level, it's going to be night and day, right? Because they have money and more people and all this stuff. That doesn't mean you can't be creative, though, and get things really well done. So this is Jeff's show, Democratic Visions. We're going to just take a little look at it, and hopefully this works. Oh, wait. Why am I touching the screen? Like, this is like a... yeah. Sorry.
I think the Attorney General's office has a lot of power. I think people of Minnesota deserve an office that uses the full powers of the office to advocate on their behalf.
Former State Representative Ryan Winkler and Tim O'Brien trade thoughts on the future of Minnesota and the future of the Office of State Attorney General. This is Democratic Visions. Here's Tim.
The state DFL party will hold its convention in Rochester on June 1, 2, 3 of next year. Delegates will be called upon to endorse candidates for all of the statewide offices, as well as for the U.S. Senate. Those statewide offices include Auditor, Secretary of State, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and State Attorney General. As of October 30, Attorney General Lori Swanson has yet to announce whether she will seek endorsement for the Attorney General office or seek endorsement for the governor's race or even something else. To date, State Representative Deborah Hillstrom, St. Paul Attorney Matt Pelican, and former State Representative Ryan Winkler have all announced that they are running for State Attorney General. Ryan, welcome to Democratic Visions.
Thanks, Tim. Nice to be here.
So, do you have an open seat to run for or not?
Well, as of now, I'm treating it like an open seat. A lot of people, including me, think that Lori Swanson will run for governor. And it's a very important office. Attorney General is very important, and we don't want to wait until the very last minute to put together a campaign. So I'm acting like it's an open seat. And if at some point Lori Swanson changes her mind and decides to run for Attorney General again instead, then I would make a different decision and not challenge her.
Well, and I assume that all the other candidates probably are of the same mind, wouldn't you think?
Well, I
So
think
let's just,
You
oops,
wouldn't-
sorry. Let's take a pause right there. Great job, Jeff. I really like your production skills.
I might add, all the scenery we have here was stuff I found here.
Right.
Okay, didn't spend a dime on it.
Yeah.
Bingo.
There
See,
you go.
that's okay too.
That's great.
That's, yeah, way to use your resources. One of the things I really like about Jeff's production of Democratic Visions, and again, I'm looking at it not as a, here, I'm going to, you're right, that bar at the bottom just
It's
is
just
obnoxious.
annoying. Yeah, it's in the way.
Get out of the way, man. One of the things I really like about the way Jeff did that video, and I don't know if you noticed this, the B-roll matches what they're talking about. The graphics match what they're talking about. He also did something that a lot of more veteran video producers do, which is you put the audio of the person who's talking underneath the end of a subject's response. So as that person is ending their thought and kind of looking at the interviewer, you can already hear the host starting to talk and ask another question. This kind of layering is very, it's not like super advanced or anything, but it is a technique that a lot of newer producers don't do, is having this separation of video and audio and playing with their relationship to make that kind of contrast. Another thing too with just this production in general is the disappearing graphics, and Jeff, I'm sure you could probably explain how to do that in Adobe After Effects, or actually in Premiere Pro, sorry. But one of the things that and I'm just not trying to be harsh, but I want to give you good feedback. One of the things that I would do in this show is I would add in post some slow motion movement, subtle. It doesn't have to be fast, but just subtle movement of, and I'll give you an example right here if I can actually get to the darn thing. No! Yeah, I knew that'd happen. All right, here we go. No, come back here.
Maybe full screen the video.
Yeah, I might have to do that. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm gonna go full screen.
I think the Attorney General's office has a
So
lot of power.
when you're right here, even on the host, one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is even on a host, you can add slow motion, like slow movement. Not slow motion, you don't want him to blah, blah, but a slow zoom in or slow zoom out. With this graphic, it could be a slow push into the top of the Capitol, right? So as these appear, as he's saying them, you could have that lettering come across as they're saying.
It'd be pull out.
Yeah, you could do a pull out as well. I mean,
And then you
right,
could drop the supers in as you have room.
right. Yeah, that would also work too. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but adding that little motion would add more to just the energy of how the video is flowing. So it might keep someone a little more just like, oh, that's kind of neat.
And State Attorney General.
What I really like too, though, is right here where he starts putting in the B-roll of the people that he's mentioning. That's key, because then, as a viewer, I can say, oh, that is Ryan Winkler. I know who that person is, or who these candidates are. So I want to give you credit for all that sort of stuff.
And that's
It's good.
extremely important
Right.
for political shows and informational shows, any kind of a show that has expressing knowledge that most people may not know about. You gotta show them, especially amongst politicians. They think they talk in acronyms, they refer to other people with first names. We don't know what they're talking about. So that's why I slap that stuff in there. It's really important. And sometimes I do what you suggest, pull back and pull in post-editing. But sometimes my photographs are too small and they look blurry, and so I can't do that.
Right.
What I've learned doing I do a lot of stuff at the St. Paul Capitol around the 5 suburbs in Bloomington. I take a lot of photos with my phone camera,
Oh.
and they're very large formats. And when I am talking about Bloomington City Hall, I have a photograph of it that I can use. And it's really, the more slides you take with your phones, the better off you're probably gonna be when you edit your show.
Yeah.
That's a really great idea.
Yeah.
With phones nowadays, you know, I mean, a lot of them even shoot in 4K now, 4K video. You know, keep in mind too that we are also a resource here. Take one of our cameras out, and you can go and do the slow zoom yourself on the Capitol, and have it be in video. Have the flag waving in the wind as you're zooming into the Capitol, things like that. Same within the studio here, like I mentioned, that I love your over-the-shoulder shots that you do here. But if you have camera people available, do a shot where it starts as an over-the-shoulder, and then you slowly zoom into the guests.
Oh boy, we
You know.
wanted to do that for.
Get some people in and practice it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
takes a bit of practice, but you know, once they get it down, you know, it can look really, really nice.
Now, one little tip too, you were talking earlier about using a video or a cutaway for a short story. If you don't have any studio people to run your cameras, you're showing that video, that gives you time to move your cameras a little bit, or to get a closer frame in on your shot, on your host, so you get a different variety of how the people look on your show, and that's really important if you have just one or two guests for a full half hour.
Yeah. Jeff does a lot of pre-production for his shows, and people don't realize that when they watch it, because you know, you don't know how much work goes into these things. But when he comes in to do his show, he has a full script written out, and he knows exactly where he's going to want to change up these shots and where he's going to lay down B-roll. He knows that stuff ahead of time, so that when he comes here, he can just quickly get those shots that he wants, and he's got, you know, everything he needs that he can take back and piece it together. So he does a really great job with that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say 80% of the time, planning is going to be your best friend when it comes to video production and in general, because
It's a lot of fun too.
it is fun. It's strategic. Like you're like, oh, I could do this at this point, and it would give me this effect,
Yeah.
or you know, something to that. Anyway,
How many crew you had on?
On this one, no crew at all, unfortunately.
Okay, just,
Yeah, I recall that we couldn't get anyone. And Ryan Winkler's an important guy.
Ryan
and,
Winkler is important.
you know, and the host, Tim, is pretty good and all that. But we manage, and Ahmed too, he's a longtime producer. He deals with the same challenges too.
because my question was, where do you get your crew?
Yeah.
All right, here you go.
Right.
You're here to meet people to help out.
Right.
They could potentially help out. You help out with their show, they help out with yours. You know, like I mentioned, you recently took the orientation, and you can have crew on your show who aren't members of the station. You know, if they're just friends of yours or whatever, and they don't have to live in the area either. They can come on and just help you out as a crew specifically for your show. They can't check out equipment, they can't become members, things like that, but they can serve as crew, and they do receive training on how to use this stuff. You know, anybody you think might be interested in it, just, you know, you can have them come
Anybody I
come
can
on board.
recruit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
sometimes it really is like, hey, what are you doing today? Nothing. Hey, want to come with me for like an hour? Sure. Okay. I
Well,
mean,
they need training ahead of time, so you need a little more
a
planning.
little more than that. Yeah,
But,
I'm being,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
exaggerating. But yeah, so let's take a look at a national show. So this is Ellen. Obviously, you know, the production level is super high, but the concept is still the same. This is a talk show. Oh my goodness. Why are you being this way? Thank you. No. Okay,
Jump to the
well,
end.
clearly I jumped. Man, the controls on this thing, I
This
see
is
like...
more like that Republican.
Yeah, this is more... Okay. Let's just take a look for a little bit here.
Tropical vacation, switching it up.
Yep, there. So it basically, it doesn't matter what movie you do, you're just in good shape all the time.
I'm just trying to stay in shape for as long as I can, you know, and
Yeah.
get paid to do it, why not, right?
Yeah, but I mean, did you know, how much in advance before Black Panther did you know that, and did they ask you to get in that kind of shape? Because you're already in good shape.
Yeah, well, I was on the press tour for Creed,
Right.
and Ryan, you know, called me up and was like, hey, you know, I'm about to go shoot this other movie, do you want to do it?
I read you didn't really get to have a social life because you're drinking 1.5 gallons of water, so you have to pee all the
You
time.
don't know, all things you use the bathroom.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Especially in the middle of the night, you're trying to sleep, you gotta wake up, it's bad, you're like, oh my God, I'm just gonna hold it, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't quite work out.
Right.
Okay, so what I'll point out a couple things. One is the use of images moving in the background that the guest and the host are referring to. You know, we could actually probably use this TV.
Well, I'm actually
we
going to
do
be
that.
getting one with the studio upgrade. And the
Excellent.
studio upgrade and the new switcher that we're getting, I'm going to have a monitor that you can use in the background that you could put like a logo behind you or whatever, or you could cycle through images like that type of
Right.
thing, or video clips.
That's
or whatever,
super cool.
so.
Well, and so one of the things I hope all of you noticed though is that the shot types they use are the exact same types that we can use in this studio. It was a wide shot that shows the two people, right? So Ellen and Michael. And then it was a medium shot from their waist up of each one of them.
And the zoom.
And the zoom.
They
And-
started out wide
yeah.
when they were talking about the pictures, and then
Right.
when it went back to this background with the palm trees, it went real quick
Right.
down into them.
The thing that is not as obvious is the preparation work here. Notice that the title, Michael B. Jordan barely had a social life during Black Panther. That instantly gets someone thinking, why? Then it's a funny joke, right? It's something that's amusing. This goes back to why would someone want to watch your show and make something people want to watch. So what I'm getting at is when you're doing a segment on something, find out what is interesting about your piece. What it makes it unique, what makes it something that I would want to tune in and learn about. And make it, write the questions ahead of time and think about what answers someone might say. It's not crazy to pre-plan jokes. They do it all the time in TV production. So that sort of thing is okay. But that's why my point to all of you is that the planning process is almost more important than the actual shoot date, because you can reshoot, jokes or whatever, but planning out how it all works and fits together is kind of the fun of video production in some ways, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you guys noticed that you have questions about? We haven't watched the whole segment, obviously, but
Well, I really like this time of year. I love seeing palm trees in the background. And
This is California too.
I don't care, but you've
Yeah.
got a green screen back there. Is it possible, say for Ahmed, to do a show set up so he and his guests are lit up properly and green screen in some stuff in the background?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what it's there for.
Yeah.
Anytime people want to learn how to use a green screen, I'm happy to show them how to do it. We have the ability to do it through the switcher. It'll look a little bit cleaner if you do it in post-production, but doing it in post is relatively easy to do as well. But yeah, definitely. Throw in some palm trees
Would you
behind it.
recommend that for some of the shows being done here from time to time?
Yeah. If you want to have it, changing up your background every now and then, absolutely. And some of the shows do use it. We actually have a couple different shows that use it pretty regularly.
And another question too, if that key works, is it possible, either in post or while you're taping, to have a slightly moving background, like a textured and moving background?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you can drop anything into a green screen background, pictures, video, whatever. One thing to keep in mind, this background behind Ellen there, I'm guessing probably one of her producers went out and shot it. It's got to be something that you own the rights to. You can't just go and pick a video or something, or some type of graphic off of like Google or something like that. Keep that in mind, that it's something you have to have the copyright ownership to. So
and copyright is
Yeah.
that's a whole other beast
Yeah.
to tackle. But
we should do that for producers.
yeah, we
Club.
should do sometimes, because that's also big. What?
Yeah.
I didn't know I was violating copyright. Well, yeah. Did you shoot it? I didn't know. I don't know. But yeah, so this is those are some examples of talk shows. So let's try it together. So what we'd like to do is make this a little more engaging for all of you, and not just have you listen to us talk. How could we make a talk show? The first thing we'd want to do is, what is the talk show about? Anyone, throw out an idea of a talk show that you might consider doing that maybe you haven't.
Satire and politics.
Oh,
Satire and
satire and politics.
Okay.
Okay.
All
So
right.
what are some
Satire.
examples that you've seen that are already out there? I can think of a couple. And
Well,
only,
Saturday Night Live.
yeah, Saturday Night
I
Live.
mean,
Right?
That's political satire.
Absolutely.
Well, it's
right.
turned into it. Didn't used
Well,
to
it
be,
didn't
but
used to
big
be.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, what is it? It's a Colbert Show.
yeah, Colbert Show.
The Colbert
That's what I was
Show is
thinking.
definitely at that point now, right? So then let's dig into, all right, so if we want to do political satire, what are some unique ways we could structure that show that is different, that you haven't seen before and maybe you'd want to try doing? That's a tough question, and this is where kind of the thinking process comes along. To me, and again, just off the top of my head, maybe something where the host starts off at a meeting with actual politicians and people and is playing a character, right? And every show, they start off with doing some little gag at the open, and that intros the show into what the bigger theme of that particular episode is about. I don't know. But that's a way that I haven't seen yet that you could probably do, right? So what's the purpose of the talk show? Again, we could political satire.
Yeah, comedy,
Comedy.
entertainment, but potentially even informational. You know, I mean, even some of those political shows out there now, like the Colbert Show. You know, they try to also be informative too. Obviously, it's a little bit, you know, leaning more one way than the other. But you know, people can argue that maybe some of those shows are not always based in fact. But you know, but that's what makes it, you know, funny. It could make it even funnier.
Now, the bar is very high for political satire these days with guys like Bill Maher and this English guy who's, I mean, John
Oliver.
They're all extremely high.
Right, but
And-
so can you learn by watching their shows how they,
Yeah.
what they're,
These,
Absolutely.
Maher has about a team of 12 writers writing stuff for him. And so I think our challenge and Ahmed's challenge is what can we do here with what we have that's still interesting to people? Because we're not going to be able to do what Bill Maher does or Jon Stewart. We just can't. And one of that way is finding some people who are automatically interesting. And what Ahmed does from time to time on a lot of his shows, he's got a lot of thoughts, gets kicked around in the press for his thoughts too, is he opens his show up with his own thoughts about what the general subject of the half hour is going to be, and that kind of works, you know, that kind of works. I've attempted to do a number of comedy videos, and no budget, but I've got friends that are as ugly and as ungainly looking as I am, and so we just play with who we are, you see. And that kind of sometimes works, although no one's been interested in promoting us to any network or anything like that. But there is a real need for political satire in this town, on television and radio. There's shut me up, but there's a radio show once a week on AM 950. I forget the name of it, but it's about stand-up comics and what they're doing. The show's not funny. It's an hour a week of not being funny, and it's run by comics. So
That's the purpose?
no, that's the funniest thing about it. But it's too painful to listen to the whole thing. But it's when you're doing humor, it's really, you got to know what your target audience is and what they're going to laugh about and laugh at. It's really hard.
and it definitely wasn't something that I pursued, but if you're just talking in the structure of how would we produce that, you know, and I think you're right,
Yeah.
you have to find interesting people.
Yeah, that.
And all the people that you're talking about are usually hosts of a show.
Yeah.
You know, and that's their political statement, or that's what they do, but just to take it a step further here, I mean, could you do it, a satire political local, with local people, and have somebody out in the street doing something stupid
Yeah,
to get a political
absolutely.
Good luck.
I mean,
Well, okay, but
This-
there again,
Yeah.
it's not doing it, just the idea and the thought process of what
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out what to do.
well, I mean, the sky's the limit, really. I mean, it also kind of depends on how embarrassed you get easily out in public, I guess, and how far you're willing to go. But like, you know, and you know, finding those interesting people like you're talking about, especially like as a host, finding an interesting host that you know, has maybe a bit of a comedic background or something like that. You know, like Jeff says, good luck. I mean, it's easier said than done, but there are those people out there, even locally. You know, it's getting more involved in the community would help. You know, with a political satire, I don't know if you want to keep it evenly balanced or you want to lean it, you know, to the left or the right, but get yourself, you know, in the circuit of you know, whichever way you want to go, and meet some people out there, meet some politicians, and you know, see if any of them might be interested in hosting your
Now,
show.
one thought I had, we got a guy here interested in maybe doing a cooking show, baking bread or something like that. The Minnesota delegation to Washington, both Republicans and Democrats, annually had a hot dish
That's just cook-off, yeah.
contest in
Yeah.
Washington. Why not take our politicians and have them talk about how to take care of your house, what little techniques do you use, or how do you cook an apple pie or something like that? And that gets them off the politics stuff. I think people are tired of politics, but if you get these men and women, Republicans and Democrats, in the studio talking about little tips on how to get the driveway shoveled or something like that, you know, something real innocuous, then you have a conversation that ties everybody together, regardless of political situation.
But it's not satire then.
Well, now then you need that host.
But you also get a thing. I worked on a show back in the 70s that prior to I got there, they had Jimmy Carter come on and actually cook catfish in the kitchen
Oh,
before he was elected president.
Really?
When he was on the campaign trail. This was in Iowa. And it was just totally fascinating. But people to this day still talk about it
Yeah.
because it was something different.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing, if you can get them out of the normal environment, so
Yeah.
something that doesn't look like your normal talk show set. Like Ellen it's very casual, they're not sitting at desks and there aren't the two ferns or whatever, but it's, you know, it's like, all right, it's like sitting in her living room, but with this background. But, you know, it's like, all right, you can play with the general jokes, like judging politicians by would you want to have a beer with them? Well, shoot at a bar or mock up a bar and sit there with a couple glasses of beer, and that could just like change up the the setting.
Politicians
and
getting drunk.
Yeah.
That is
That
a
is
good
a
show.
Yeah.
Get a Republican and a Democrat together and
Driving
buy them
cars-
beers
driving cars
and let them
drunk.
talk.
Oh no,
That's a
drink
great
two
show.
under the
That is.
table.
That's
Yeah.
Really
Pretty
fun.
good.
That's
Yeah,
what
if you haven't seen
Obama
it,
does.
if you haven't seen it.
That's how you open your show.
Cars and
Driving to
coffee.
BCAT to do your show.
You drink here on
If
this
you haven't
stuff?
seen Steinfeld, Coffee with comedians or Cars
Comedians
and
and
Coffee.
cars getting coffee.
I've been binge watching that for the last week.
Have you?
Yeah.
I watched the whole one, all of them too.
And to your point about the satire, one of the things too is even if you don't find an interesting character, sometimes making up an interesting character is just as good. One of the examples I'll use is this guy, he's on Jimmy Kimmel, and he keeps showing up at like events for, just this is a hot topic, but Roy Moore, when he was running, they did a little segment where this guy showed up and he said, I'm the biggest Roy Moore fan in the world, but he would shout out questions at him like, how is it, you know, pursuing underage girls or something ridiculous, you know, like, even though he says he supports Roy Moore, but that's satire, right? He's like, I'm the biggest fan in the world, but I'm calling you out on stuff that you're being accused of. That character, though, was based off of this comedian's just idea of how he could get in and do this segment in a very entertaining way. And another example of this was at the Super Bowl, and it's not politically related necessarily, but do you know Guillermo of Jimmy Kimmel Show? He actually went and started trying to get players to autograph Tom Brady's cookbook. Right, and it was very entertaining. That's like was his whole shtick. but because he wasn't self-conscious about it, and he just rolled with doing it, it made it really funny because all these players would either just be like, okay, or like Bill Belichick, he was very serious and like, no. And then at the end, he finally does sign his book.
Sure.
But it's just kind of, if you find a character or make up a character for yourself even, and get one person to just follow you to like local events, you could do the exact same thing that these national productions do, but just at a much more local level. And, you know, that's, again, we talk about political satire, well, there you go. If you disagree with like maybe the Southwest Light Rail line or something, you'd go to a meeting and say, you know, I'm the biggest supporter, but why does it cost, you know, blah, blah, blah money, and
Be prepared
whatever.
to be thrown out, though.
Right, correct. And that's part of the sacrifice, yeah. But that's also what makes it interesting to watch, is because viewers are hooked on that idea of, oh my gosh, this guy's really doing this at a real meeting. This is crazy. So yeah, it's something that I've noticed becoming more of a trend is YouTube, and online video has kind of sprung up. Who can outdo the other person with ridiculousness, ridiculous characters, questions, that sort of stuff. It's just one way to take it. Doesn't necessarily mean you should do it.
Sure.
But, you know, there's just an option there.
Or
Anyway.
You,
Yeah, well,
you can do the, I don't know what the ethics of this are, but you bring in the youth, it's like have children ask questions, because politicians love to engage with children. It's good for the camera, but then they'd be surprised to have a really adult, regular, serious political question asked of them. And
oh, that certainly happened this last presidential campaign. I know that. All
I
right.
think we missed the crew.
Did you? Oh, yeah. The crew
So, again, for political satire, how big of a crew would you need? It depends. Like Dietrich said, if you find a funny character that can go out to these events and be your on-camera talent, you can run camera by yourself. That's all you need. You know, you hook them or give them a handheld microphone, and you just follow them around. Easy as that. If you're going to tie in studio segments into it, you could potentially do it by yourself, like Patty's doing right now, and just set the cameras up, or have, you know, like we talked about, have one camera person to add some movement, or in post you can zoom in and out, like Dietrich was saying. So for a political satire type of thing, potentially one person plus talent, but the actual crew size, potentially one person, you know, up to maybe 4, 5,
or 5.
something like that.
It just depends on if you want, like, say, and again, I'm going to go back to this example because I think it's an example of success, being successful at this particular type of comedy. If you had multiple camera people in the audience using even their smartphones, because like Ben was mentioning, it would be nice to get some of BCAT's cameras because I think they're higher quality, obviously. But if need be, you can have like one person on a smartphone next to the character, one person kind of in the back getting the whole scene. But it's thinking about positioning. It's, you know, where do I want a person to be to capture the reaction I want to get? So you could get one person up front getting the politicians' reactions to it, you know, that sort of thing. But thinking it out ahead of time is kind of the most important part about making sure it's a successful run. Otherwise, you might miss a key moment that you wanted. All right. Anyway.
Okay, so worship services. I was kind of hoping maybe some people would show up today that are planning on doing worship services or are already doing them. I don't think, do you do some? Or?
I've done some. So.
Okay, well good. And we got some stuff to talk about then. With worship services, obviously a lot of the time, probably most of the time, they're done at a church somewhere. Generally, I guess you could say the host would be like the pastor. But the questions for this are a little bit different. So we're going to start off with, how do I want to capture the service? Are you just going to use a single camera in the back of the church? Are you going to have multicam? Are you going to do live switching out in the field? Or are you just going to record individually on however many cameras you have and edit it together in post? I would recommend it. A lot of the worship services that I've seen are done on single camera, which it's fine if you're doing a lot of like movement, zooming in and out, things like that, following the pastor as they're walking around stage, things like that. But I would recommend doing multiple camera for this type of thing. For one, churches are quite large generally, so to be able to have these different angles would help out a lot. You could get one angle on the congregation, as they're singing or something like that. It's a great shot to cut away to instead of, zooming out and having the back of all these people's heads while they're singing or something like that. So definitely I would say 3 cameras at least for worship services. As far as switching live in the field, that's kind of up to personal preference, I guess, if you're comfortable enough doing live switching for something like that. I personally think it would be worth it. It'd make it a lot easier on you in post, not having to do as much post-production. And then audio, this is a question I've had before from some of our producers. What type of audio gear do you need to make sure everyone is heard? Depends on the church, I guess, but generally most churches nowadays, they have a PA system. Usually the pastor has a mic on, and there's PA speakers on, up on the walls, and so that means there's got to be an audio board somewhere. Most audio boards, you can take a feed out of it, in that feed then is getting the pastor, it's getting like a band if there is one, whatever's run through this audio board, it's pulling all of that. So you should be able to take a line output from that and run it into your camera, or if you've got an external audio recording device or whatever it is, however you're recording audio, you should be able to get a feed for that. When I've done, I haven't done worship services myself, but I've done similar live events in like similar type of spaces. I then also try to set up at least one shotgun microphone like these that we have here. The more the merrier though, to be able to get the audience shots, be able to hear them singing or talking or whatever. That's why we have these set up pointed at you guys right now, because we want to hear your questions and when you're getting involved with this. Generally speaking, you're not going to need to bring microphones for the pastor. Like I said, most churches nowadays have that already. So I would say in the best situation, you'd be able to pull a line feed from their audio board, and then run that maybe into your main camera if you're doing a multi-camera shoot. Run it into your main camera or an external audio device, and then have a couple shotgun mics set up that are running to a couple other cameras, or maybe the second input of your camera or however you have that set up. So that's the type of audio gear I would bring. Why am I making it? Obviously to spread the message or the teachings of the weekly services. A lot of the time the people who are the crew for these shows, for these different churches, are members of the church themselves. So they are trying to help attract new members to the church. Maybe they just personally are very passionate about that church, or maybe they really enjoy the pastor and they just want to capture this and make it, brought to a wider audience. How big of a crew do you need? If you're going to do a multi-cam shoot, this definitely is something that you're going to want a camera operator for each camera, in my opinion, because you're going to want to be able to zoom in and out and get, close-up shots of the congregation or pan along the congregation as they're singing, things like that. You're going to want to be able to follow the pastor around. Just having a static wide shot of the stage, it's boring. It's really boring. So, like I said, if you have a single camera shoot, zooming in and out, following the person around, that helps a lot. You probably are going to want an audio operator if you're going to have, like I said, multiple microphones set up, especially if you have some type of external audio device, or maybe you have your own board that you're running things into. You want an audio operator for that. If you are doing live switching in the field, you're going to need someone to direct that, or it's called technical director, switching between the cameras. So that's kind of the crew size for that. But you could potentially do it with one person. If you have a single camera shoot, you could just do it, you're the shooter and the editor.
And how many services are broadcast through?
We get some sent to us from other churches in other cities. But we have, I think, at least 4, I want to say. And we've got a couple other religious shows where we have 3 of them where they are actually pastors themselves that come here. And that's a kind of a whole, that actually kind of falls under the talk show format, really. But yeah, we have 3 shows that they are pastors or reverends that come here, and sometimes they have guests on, and sometimes they just read passages out of the Bible or whatever it is. But that's kind of a different thing. But yeah, at actual worship services, I think there's at least 4 of them on our channel right now. I don't know about yours.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Yeah.
All produced locally, or
What's that?
all produced locally?
Yeah. Yep. I have one that's more of like a talk show format that comes to us from Texas, which is kind of interesting. I don't know why, but
Right. I have one resident who sponsors a church out of California.
Okay.
So she orders DVDs from them, and then we play them back. But yeah, I mean, Ben's point's spot on. I think one of the tricky parts about churches is that to make it interesting, it is hard with a single camera to make it like riveting or something that people want to watch. Again, that's why I think the stress of this is, how can I make it something people want to watch and want to enjoy and partake in? And one of the ways you do that is you can shoot, you can have the static camera, right? So if you're a one-person crew, you get the static camera on just that wide shot, and then you use your other camera and you're mobile. You're walking up and down the aisles. You're getting like in the face of people, or, I don't know, depending on your religious, depending on what, you don't do that at a Catholic church. I made that mistake. But, depending on what the venue is, talk with the people ahead of time and say, this is what I'm thinking. These are the areas I want to be in, and is that okay? And if they give you the approval, then, it becomes much more engaging. And again, these words keep coming back, but engaging. And part of that, too, is the action-reaction relationship. I mean, I'll be honest, as much as I love watching a 20-minute sermon, right? No, I don't. I want to see something. I want to see people reacting to what the pastor's saying. And you're going to see that in the difference between our service that we're showing locally and then the one that's national. Again, the money difference is huge, but the way to narrow that gap is to think about that action-reaction relationship. And as a pastor's delivering a powerful moment in the sermon or the speech, cut to the audience and find somebody who's really engaged. And usually you have the time to scan the crowd and say, that person really is feeling it today. Maybe there's somebody that I should focus on and keep in mind as the service progresses. So it's that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
yeah.
Anything else?
I kind of wish I would have. The Calvary Lutheran Church that we're going to show in a minute is a good example, but there's another one that's locally produced that, drawing a blank on what it's called off the top of my head right now, but their congregation, first of all, the pastor is very lively. He has a lot of energy. He gets the congregation pumped up. I grew up Catholic, so the services aren't very exciting, but and I'm not sure if this is a Lutheran congregation or what, but I've never seen a congregation get so excited before. These people are like swaying back and forth. There's one episode where this lady goes into the front row and is running back and forth in the front row with their hands in the air, but it's all done on one camera. And they do zoom in and out, they had, when the person started running, they kind of zoomed out at first, and then they zoomed back in and followed the person running back and forth, and that helps. But I would love to see someone right in the front row with a camera right in that person's face, to see their joy on their face.
I'm asking, what would Jesus say?
What would
Yeah.
Scooby do?
I mean, to Ben's point, that's exactly it. The intimacy, and this speaks more to newer video producers in general. You always get that self-conscious feeling at services, or depending on how you grew up, you might be a little self-conscious, like, oh, am I disrupting service, or am I doing something? Well, you know what? If you've talked with the leader of the church or synagogue, wherever, and they've given you the thumbs up to be there, you do your magic. You get the best shot you can.
Yep.
Don't be intimidated by that self-conscious feeling, because it's really easy to say, gosh, I just feel so weird standing here with my camera and people are looking at me and whatever. But once you let that go and you focus on the work itself and you focus on getting good shots of people, and like Ben's saying, the close-up reactions of people's faces, it's amazing how much it can add to the value of a program. Because people speak, whether they like it or not, through their facial expressions. The subtle stuff too. It can could be just a ha ha ha, like that sermon was funny, or I'm crazy lady, not crazy lady, but I'm feeling it lady running up and down the aisles. It could be something like that.
Yeah, and with that nervousness factor of things, a couple ways to help kind of curtail that, if you will. You do talk to the pastor or whoever ahead of time. Ask them to make an announcement at the beginning. This is being recorded, just so you know. You can also put up some postings like I did here. I don't know if you noticed them on your way in, saying that this event is being recorded. That helps in a couple different ways. For one, if nobody wants to be on camera, unfortunately they may leave or they may go sit off to the side or something like that. But technically, if you put up if you get permission, or if you're doing say like a public concert, for example, like a concert in the park or something like that, and you put these postings up there and you have permission to be there, legally people can't really do anything about it. They may come and voice their opinion to you, saying, "Oh, I didn't know this was being recorded. I don't want to be on camera," type of thing. But I mean, they can't take you to court for it or anything like that. So you don't have anything to really worry about with that, and that might help you get more comfortable yourself, and just like you said, focus on the work. So.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look, and we'll just watch just a few minutes of this.
Here are the services printed in your bulletin, and we begin by calling upon our God in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Remember, O Lord, your compassion and love, for they are from everlasting. The abundant grace and mercy of God be with you all.
Where is he? There you go.
Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors in various ways by the prophets.
He's working the crowd.
He is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being.
The toughest thing in my experience with churches is lighting.
Yes, that was something I was going to mention too. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, let's pause for a second. Okay.
Mine is bad singing.
Bad
Betsy.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things you all just pointed out was the bad lighting here. Yeah, Matt, why don't you?
Well, and that's one thing that I was going to mention is the lighting. Unfortunately, that's not really something you can control. You potentially could ask, a lot of these churches have the ability to like dim the lights. You could potentially ask them to bring the lights up a little bit. But with public events or live events, and especially like services, they are trying to set a certain mood for their congregation there, and you don't want to have these bright lights shining in people's faces. You especially don't want a bright light shining in the pastor's face, and it's going to be distracting for them. So lighting can be a challenge with these services. It's not something that personally I would worry about too much, because it's kind of out of your control a lot of the time. If you've got a nicer camera that can do a little bit better in low light, that type of thing can help. But like I said, you're not really going to be able to set up your own lights, unfortunately. So.
And obviously, one of the things that this service was shot in standard definition. You can tell right instantly just by the video quality itself. One of the things too that Calvary, or just churches in general, we go back to this whole idea, and I'm going to scan a little bit further ahead. So let's go to full screen really quick. As they're going, this person is zooming in and out, but Ben actually mentioned the key point. Where's the pastor? Where's the guy who's talking? Why do I hear a voice and I don't see the person? That shouldn't be something that a viewer should be asking themselves, because that audio, I mean, it's fine to have maybe 3 seconds, welcome everybody to the, but then cut to that pastor talking to the audience or the
Disembodied
worship
word
leader.
of God.
Right, yeah, that's right, yeah. So it's tricky, though, when you have this one camera thing. So later on in this program, they do eventually get to the speaker right here when he's reading the gospel. But even at the beginning, it's a little more difficult, again, with that one camera shoot, to make it interesting from a video production standpoint when you only have the one camera. So even if you have to ask, and somebody ask a young person or anybody really, any of the congregants at your church, may I have you for a minute, and would you mind running this camera? And then showing them, an hour before service starts. That might be something you could do while you run another camera that's on the floor and you're recording close-ups of the pastor speaking or what have you.
Not with our equipment.
But now with our
Again,
equipment.
you do have to be certified ahead of time.
Right. Exactly.
Plan
That's the
ahead,
thing.
and if you want someone to help you out, have them come and take the class and get certified.
Yeah, that's right.
If it's your own equipment, do whatever.
Then do it. Sorry, Ben. May get in trouble here. All right, so let's take a look at Joel Osteen. This guy's production's through the roof. Even the intro is ridiculously nice.
This guy's from Houston.
Yes, he is.
That's dizzying.
Well, God bless you. It's a joy to come into your home. If you're ever in our area, please stop by and be a part of one of our services. I promise you, we'll make you feel right at home. I like to start with something funny, and I heard about this lady that died. She was at the pearly gates, and St. Peter said, you can't come in yet. You have to correctly spell a word. She said, what word? He said, any word. So she spelled the word love, L-O-V-E. He said, welcome to heaven. Then Peter asked her if she would take his place for just a moment. He instructed her if anybody came up just to follow the same procedure. A few minutes, she sees her ex-husband walking up. She can't believe it. Says, what are you doing here? He said, I just had a heart attack. Did I really make it to heaven? She said, not yet. You have to spell a word correctly. He said, what word? There was a long pause, and she said, Czechoslovakia.
Look at that audience
I want to
shot.
talk to you today about
So,
emptying out the
before we go in too much further, if you notice the pacing of that, it's quick. The longest shot that I think I saw in this whole thing was where he's telling that story, and it's just the tail end of the story, and then when he hits that punchline, reaction from the crowd, right? So that action, reaction is very important. When you go back to, and again, this guy, they have lots of money, so let's face it, right? This shot is just showing you how large of a scale, whoops, let me go back there, how large of an audience he has. So here, I'm going to put him on silent so we can just focus on this part. It helps that he's very charismatic on camera, and he can sound great. But this movement shot, notice that you've got the flag in the back, right? So, America. And then it's, you got the huge Super Bowl-esque crowd watching this pastor lead the way.
It's like a stadium. That's not a church.
Honestly, it looks like a stadium.
Is it CG?
Well, yeah, maybe. Not right. Maybe. But
No.
no, it's not. With the way this shooting is, though, you can tell that in between those shots, either a director is telling that camera op to go close up on his face, medium shot, right, on the body, maybe from the waist up. This one obviously shows the pulpit and that sort of stuff. And then paying attention to what is going on in the service kind of changes how the camera work functions. So as, obviously, if he's telling a story, right, you're focusing on what he's saying. And this is an intimate shot, right? You can see the expression in his face. He uses his hands to talk, right?
But there's still movement in it. They're zoomed in far enough that they're following him as he's moving around, because otherwise he's going to go out of frame. But that adds, dynamic to it.
And then when it gets to that punchline, ha 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 ha, it's, so you're showing that reaction to reinforce to a viewer, though, that it's funny. It's the same way like how laugh tracks tend to work in shows.
Doesn't matter, this is
But-
all bullshit.
So it might be.
That's a different.
That's a different.
That's a different
The whole service is kind of
I like
designed
it.
for television.
Right.
Right.
I mean, he's a televangelist, you know. I
Right.
mean, it's you know,
That's his.
he's making money out of this. He's a business guy, really, to,
Right.
to be honest. But I was just going to point out real
Oh, I'm
quickly
sorry.
that my favorite shot of that whole
Yeah.
thing, of the minute and a half that we watched, was him looking at the camera at the beginning there saying welcome. I loved that
Oh.
personally,
Yeah.
and it's something that local worship services could do with a multi-camera shoot. You start out with one of those shots and you pre-plan this. You say, okay, you're going to be on camera 2 in the middle here at the beginning when you say you're welcome, and have him look directly into the camera, because then he's not only addressing the audience that's there, he's addressing the audience at home. And I think that is awesome. And then as soon as he's done with that, you zoom back out, and I believe that was the same camera that followed him as he was telling the story. It just zoomed out a little bit. But I personally loved that shot that he was addressing the audience, you know, at home as well.
Right. Our mutual hero, Boyd Hooper, local Tier 11 reporter, he calls this shot the handshake shot, right, where you intimately meet someone. And it's used in a lot of different things, but it's the first time you meet somebody. And so to see somebody who's smiling and happy and welcoming you to something, like Ben said, it adds a lot. So that's a good call.
Just
Yeah.
two things, that your comments are excellent, and I really like yours too.
Which one?
I'm not saying, but that welcome shot could be used more frequently with the
Yes.
church shows that are done here. And a lot of these guys and gals who are doing the religious shows aren't doing that, and maybe they could use a little friendly coaching on.
Right.
Yeah, because when they're talking at the camera, and some of the shows done here and other places, they're just talking to a camera. They forget that that camera has to be a person that they really care about.
Well, and if they think it'll disrupt during the service, they can either pre-shoot it before the service or afterwards,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then punch it in, so.
And then
Absolutely.
another thing, this is a church not built for worship, it's a church built for television shows. Look at the audience, look at where the light falls in various parts of the audience. That's not a black void back there. Look at him, there's a little light blessing his shoulders from whatever direction he's photographed. It's all carefully worked out totally for television cameras, this whole thing.
It is, but I mean, like we said, you know, even going back to like the talk show thing, like Ellen versus local things, there's a lot of things that they do here that you could do. You know, most churches, even though the lighting's not great, they're at least usually evenly lit,
Sure.
you know, so you should be able to get shots of the congregation that are, you know, decently well lit. You know, we have different types of equipment here where you could get some of those sweeping shots. Like Dietrich was saying, you if you're all by yourself, set up a wide shot in the back and then run through the aisles with a, you know, a shoulder mount or something like that. Or we've got a thing called a fig rig where you can do this handheld movement. You can do this sweeping shot where you start up high and you bring it down. You know, you can do these different type of techniques to add, you know, some different.
Sure.
dynamics to
The Lutheran church thing that you showed before, that brings up a point that I occasionally have to think about when I'm out on location, just maybe with Ahmed or someone else, is where your camera is set up. That position of the camera in the Lutheran church was not a good place to have a camera. He was too far away. And if he could have gotten permission to be closer in one of those pews where no one sits in up front, that would have been a lot better for him.
Careful, Jeff. All pews are assigned to people, as we know, at church. Right?
Really?
Everybody's like, "This is my
But-
pew. You can't sit here." I sit here every
Even
week.
if an angle, but with the better cameras now, I mean, you can get really nice looking shots of a minister and people praying and things like that. You really can. And this guy looks like $1 million because that's what they probably spent on the lighting grid here.
They probably spend,
More than that.
well, I would say on what is this, a half hour long thing?
Look at that.
On each half hour production, I bet they spend $250,000 at
Yeah.
least.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's a fundamental difference in the mindset that we might want to consider. It's when we're producing something for video versus trying to record something that's happening and make it look like it's produced for video.
I wanted that. Yes, it's the same difference between a parent shooting their kid's soccer game and then an actual video crew shooting a
Right.
soccer game. You know what I mean? The mom, I shouldn't say that. The parent sitting on the side holding their
It's the
shaky
mom.
phone
Always
doing
the
this.
mom.
That's all. Yeah, I'm sorry, moms out there, I love you all. But shaking the shaky shot, moving around, trying to capture the kid, versus a camera that's on a tripod, slowly zooming and following the action as the ball's moving across the field. They're totally different. They're totally different. And you hit on something that I think is one of the differences between when you say that I actually want to be a video producer and I make videos, right? Video production is an art, right? So you have to think about it, and it's something that you don't just grab stuff and start going willy-nilly. It's something that you can think out and take time to make look really good. So to your point, I really love that point you made. That's excellent. But yeah, with our church services, I think they, and I don't want to make assumptions, guys out there, but I think one of the things, to your point, is that they're in that mindset of we just want to record the service rather than we are making a show out of this. So good way to phrase it. Anything else you want to say?
No, I was going to jump in onto the next slide
Sure.
here.
Yep.
I think we could probably skip this because
Yeah.
for one, to save time, for
Yeah.
two, we pretty much just pieced together one that here, just talking about different things on how you could shoot these services. So just to try to save some time, we'll
Absolutely.
skip trying it together.
Okay, so next are concerts and music shows. So this could also include music videos. One of the things I really like about doing music shows and concerts is that it goes back to that feeling of energy. What type of music are you watching? Is it like a very intimate coffee house artist who's like just on their guitar hanging out? Is it a death metal band that's jumping all over and screaming and like making the crowd go wild? Is it a rap hip hop concert? What's the energy that the music has? The reason I bring it to that point is that can help you kind of figure out the camera work you'll want to do. If it's a coffee house artist, you may want more intimate, slow shots, right? Moving across the guitar, their face as they're singing, profile shots, with silhouette shots, that sort of stuff. But with like death metal, you may want more high energy cut, and it's jumping from like a guy shredding on the guitar to a kid just like wilding out next to him. It definitely has a different kind of vibe when you're thinking of the plan to shoot something like that. So one of the other parts of this too is, do you want to interview a band? Are you making something that is telling the story about a local group? Like, let's just say we did something on Prince before he blew up, right? You would go back and you would find the people who gave him his first shot at recording. You'd go to the theater in North Minneapolis where he did a lot of his shows before he became famous. All these sort of things are things to think about while you're preparing to actually do the shoot. And contacting people in his life. Maybe you want to talk with his first manager or his last manager even, his first bandmates, his latest or current bandmates. So going through that list of what do I need to cover and what should I do, it just depends on the structure of your show. But if you're talking about a live event, that's what I was referring to, obviously in the earlier stage. Or you can mix them together. So why are you making it? A lot of the time, it's for entertainment. It's to show how cool a group is and to help share their music with the world. And you may be making it for fans. So one of the things that I like seeing is after a concert, getting the reactions from people like, hey, how was that show? Did you love it? Was it super cool? What'd you think? And if, most fans are pretty wound up and they're ready to roll and say like, they're awesome. I'd definitely go see them at XL. Something like that. How big of a crew? Again, this is a very kind of mixed question. And it just depends on that style of shooting and obviously resources and all the like, but a coffee house shoot, for instance, is a lot easier, as I think, as a one-person deal, because it's slow, intimate. You can set up a still shot, and it will look and feel just as close as you would when you're moving in with another camera to get the more intimate details, like the close-ups of the face or the hands or anything like this. But then again, we go back to the high-energy concerts. You may want to have multiple people helping you out, because in post, you can marry these things together and figure out, oh, I have the shot from behind the guitarist as he's throwing his guitar to the side, and then my buddy's down there with another camera getting the guy jumping into the mosh pit or whatever, right? So those are ways to plan things out. And you can talk with an artist beforehand and ask, like, so I don't know how you're feeling tonight, but you know, what kind of things do you want to do with the audience? Is there something fun or unique you want to get that might be worth having a discussion about?
Doesn't hurt to also know who's singing on what songs and what solos are where.
Exactly.
And who's got them.
Yep, that playlist, right? If an artist has a mixture of songs where one is really fast-paced and kind of lively, but then one that might be more intimate and slow, I mean, you could just change it up right on the fly too.
Yeah.
So,
And
is there anything you want to mention?
Yeah, and an audio person, I mean, if you're doing a band in the studio here, an audio person is essential, in my opinion. You wouldn't be able to switch cameras in there while trying to pay attention to the audio. It's really hard. I've done it.
Ideally,
The audio sounds horrible.
I would suggest bringing their audio person who knows what the band sounds like, knows when the solo breaks are, and take a feed into your board.
If they've got one. Some smaller bands don't, but I've done some smaller bands here in this studio, and I've done the audio and the switching by myself. It's not an easy thing to do, but yes, their own audio person helps a lot. I actually, one time that I did a thing here, there was an audio person here where he took all of the inputs from the instruments and everything, and his own little board off to the side and mixed it there, and then sent me a line feed, and that's all I had to take, and that's awesome. That's really great for me. But yeah, so if they have their own audio person, that's great. But then even out at a live concert, I shot a concert at First Avenue once for a bluegrass group that are some friends of mine. And I had myself as a camera guy up front. My wife actually helped as the main center cam, and then a friend of mine was on a camera up on the balcony, getting some other close-up shots and things like that. And then last minute, I got a friend of mine who, it helps that he's an audio guy, but last minute I said, hey, can you come? I want to make sure that this sounds really good. And of course, they have a huge mixer there, and he just took a line feed from that and he ran it into a little, small portable audio recorder.
Zoom?
But a Zoom, yep.
Zoom.
But he made sure, he knew enough about audio that he made sure that the settings were right on the recorder and that they were sending a good level, a good line level to the recorder. And he's comfortable enough talking to the person running the board there, saying, hey, can you give me a little bit more output, and that helped a lot, and it sounded fantastic. And I'm glad I thought of it last minute to see if he could come, because if it was me, I would have just thrown the thing next to the audio board and hit record, and it probably would have sounded horrible while I'm running around with the camera, right?
It'll give you more options at the end though, too. So.
Yep. So, think of those things ahead of time. Definitely I would say with most music things that you're going to do, you're going to want an audio person, because you really want it to sound good.
That's the music part of this whole thing, right?
So, I mean, it's the kind of an old saying, or it's not exactly a saying, I guess, but in video production, audio is far more important than video. Because even with talk shows, if you can't hear what the people are saying, what's the point of your show? If they're just talking to each other and they sound really muddled or something, and you are really quiet, people aren't going to sit there and watch it if they don't know what they're talking about. But music, it's especially important. You want the band to sound as good as possible. So.
And can you manipulate that post-production?
Yeah.
I mean, can you add effects to a guitar post-production?
Well, it depends on how it's recorded. If it's recorded into a multi-track recorder and you have the ability to go in and tweak those individual tracks, then yes. Here, we don't have that ability. It all just gets sent out from our board as one audio feed. So you got to get it right the first time, essentially, in the field. So.
Yeah, one of the other things too, and this is just in general with live events, and we probably could introduce this to the worship service, but if you have multiple cameras, one of the easiest ways to make sure everything is lined up is to just hit record, do the clap. So I'm sure all of you have seen in Hollywood, they have the clapboards, like scene 1, burp, right? You do that because later on, you will sync all of those clips up to that same audio, right? So the concept is, it's called multi-clip editing, right? And when you hit record, don't ever press it again. Just pretend like you're gonna record everything. Because in Premiere Pro and in other editing systems, what you can do is you sync all those video clips up to that same snap, and then you cut back and forth along the timeline, but the audio is all lined up. So let's just say, to Ben's point about a concert, if you have a Tascam or a Zoom, you have a nice clean audio feed that you can then use to sync up with those video clips. So you can take out the sound then from your cameras and just have that nice feed underneath, but it looks like it matches up with all your video that you're shooting. I don't know if it's easier to draw that out, but that concept, right, it works in almost any type of live production setting. And this is weddings included, because I mean, this is how I shoot weddings, is I will set up 3 still cameras, and then I'll do the whole clap at the beginning so that all my clips all have that in it. And then in post, it makes it 100 times easier than having little chunk clips that I have to figure out when was this during the service, when was that. They're all just one long clip, and then you just cut back and forth between them. So that's a trick that you can use in editing that is very, very helpful in combination with recording clean audio. So let's take a look. Baby Art Blues by Lori Patton. She's a local producer. It's very, in my opinion, very good for us.
And that was done here?
This, I don't know where this
where
is
did they
recorded.
record this, Ben?
It wasn't done here.
I don't know if it was here.
Obviously not that.
So you guys noticed that, at least with the Barclay Boys, it was a 3-camera shoot, right? So you had your wide shot, right? Then it cut to that camera. So if we had our 3 cameras set up in here, 1, 2, and let's pretend 3 is right there. It started off on that 2-1, capturing the whole group. Then it cut to that camera right there of the guy doing his thing. It was more of a medium shot of just that player, and it did a slow pull back. Then they cut over to camera 1 as the rest of the band started joining in. So that sort of thinking, like to Brett's point, if you know that somebody's going to jump in at a particular time and you want to capture them, preset in your mind, okay, at this point in the song, this guy's going to jump in and really get rolling. So then maybe I want to switch to that person. But I really enjoy Baby Blue Arts because it's local, but they also do a really good job at showing local artists in more of an interesting way, and it's not all just stills. You know, there's movement to it. I don't know. Any thoughts on it, Ben? Or?
No, I
I
agree
would
with all
suspect,
that.
just like in church service, the lighting is, well, I suppose an outdoor too, but I mean in coffee shops or something, lighting is also the problem too.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely, because especially a smaller venue like a coffee shop, a lot of times they don't want you bringing in other lights because it's just a nuisance and it potentially could block the view of some people and stuff. But I have done some shoots where ahead of time, like for example, like I helped out on a shoot that was at a DJ school. So it's a school about learning how to do DJing stuff, and they had a special guest come, and I mean the guys who own the school are super laid back and really cool, so that helps. But we told them ahead of time that it's really dark in there and we're going to be setting up some lights, and they were fine with it. I personally wasn't. It was such a small space. I wasn't super happy with the lighting setup because one of the lights was kind of taking the place of where someone could have sat, type of thing, kind of in the way. But we had to do it because it was such a dark space. We had to have some extra lighting, or it would have looked absolutely terrible. But yeah, I mean, you could definitely go. I mean, you're going to be going at least a couple hours ahead of time, most likely, to set up anyway. So go ahead of time and ask the owners, can I set up some lights, or even go the day before and call them or something and say, hey, I'm going to be recording this event. Is it all right if I set up a light or two or something like that?
How much control do you have in adjusting your scenes after the fact? If you say you ended up with not bright enough lighting, can you swing once you get into the edit booth a certain amount of hue up and down or whatever? And that?
Yeah, like brightness and contrast and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, I mean there are those effects in pretty much any editing software that you have out there. The more that you boost up the light, especially if it's like a really, really low light shot, the grainier it's going to get.
I see.
You're going to lose quality. Well, it's not. It's weird because you're not losing pixels per se, but it's just ends up getting this kind of grade. I don't know how to like misty looking
It's
look to it.
it's
Like
called
it gets
noise in an
noise,
image, right?
yeah.
If you've seen still photography, it's related to that ISO.
You're forcing the image.
Right. You're
Yeah.
forcing it to go up to a point where maybe the camera doesn't have enough information that it's collected. That's why, and sometimes you'll, and I'm not sure if our BCAT cameras can do this, but if you shoot in Vlog or log, where it's removed all the coloring from it, and you do post-production color edits to give your video a certain look. And that's again another Producers Club topic for a different time, but that's something you could do to counter the lack of lighting, is to shoot it all with in Vlog. So basically without a color profile already attached to it, if that makes sense.
So it's basically like a raw file for
Exactly. It's almost, yeah, that's essentially what it is. So what it allows you to do in post is then alter that brightness and contrast to the way you want it to be, including the hues and if you want a more relaxed kind of chill tone, you may want to do more blues. If your music's a little more angry, red, like sort of thing, warmer colors. But yeah, to Ben's point, I think one of the cool parts about doing these is if you go ahead of time and you can mark where a certain person is standing, and either have lights that isolate just the band members from different angles, you can create different kind of moods. It just depends. I don't know, Ben, for like an example I've done is I've taken a softbox light. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's used in photography, but what's the word? And I'm losing the word.
Diffuse.
Thank you. Diffuses the light in a way that it makes it a little more even instead of just blasting one person. Another way to trick or to do this without a softbox is you bring a light and you can bounce it off of walls. And so that softens the light instead of making it so harsh on a particular person.
If they're a light wall.
If they're a
You can't do
light
it
wall.
with
You
a
can't do it on that wall. Yeah, that's
You can do it
true.
with you can do
Good
it with
call.
the floor. You can
Right.
turn it on the
Yeah,
floor.
Right.
I've also brought extra tripods and put a whiteboard up there and shot the board.
Oh.
Use that
There you go.
as a
A
reflection.
reflector, yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And
And we've got a reflector here too that you could clip up on a
Oh, yeah.
tripod or something and shoot into the reflector.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta get moving this quarter.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah. Oh. So as far as, we don't have to watch this, but you've all
you
seen, I'm
guys watch
sure,
it, yeah.
halftime Super Bowl shows. That's the opposite, it's really big produced. This was actually a bad example because this year the audio was just awful. I don't know if you saw the halftime show. It was terrible because US Bank Stadium is not so good for the bouncing of audio and stuff, and they didn't think that out. Anyway, watch the Prince one because it's probably my favorite halftime show of all time. Anyway, so we can probably move ahead
Yeah,
with
let's
this.
skip this too, just because
So
we're
why
running
don't
out
you
of
jump
time.
to- yeah.
And we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end too, but we just wanted to quickly, we wanted to focus on those main 3 ones, but there really are endless possibilities for types of shows that you can create for public access television. I mean, you could even do a reality TV show. Reality TV shows nowadays really aren't real. A lot of times they're scripted out, but like we have a show here that I think it's not being produced any longer, but it was at one time where it's like home renovations. Type of thing. You can do a reality TV show about home renovations or doing your canning. I mean, that's essentially a reality show in a way. It's one that's do it yourself. Yeah, exactly. Live events, we actually did cover that a bit. Sports, you could go out and do a sporting event, with a multiple cam shoot. Short film or narrative film, this is something.
Sorry.
Short film, narrative film, this is something that a lot of public access producers don't do. I wish more people did. It takes a little bit more pre-production, but everyone knows what short films and narrative films are. They're scripted films. Music videos, public service announcements, so those are, if you're not familiar with that, they do them a lot on like public television and stuff like that. So it could be anything from wear your helmet while you're riding a bike, don't smoke, things like that. Whatever things that you think the public can learn from.
Or something for a nonprofit agency.
Yep. Well, and promotional. So like non-commercial. Here anyway, promotional things have to be non-commercial, and or they could cover like free public events, type of thing. You can't do like commercials here for a company, but you could do, you could go to a company and do interviews. If you think what this company does is really beneficial to the community, you could go and interview the owner or something like that, and did B-roll of them, whatever they do there at their facility. But you can't actually create a 30-second spot that you're going to try to then sell to NBC or something. Documentaries are great for public access, and I put a little star next to that because we're actually going to be doing another producers club all on documentary filmmaking, so you guys should show up to that. But documentaries, I love making them. It's interviews and B-roll, as like all documentaries are. So whatever subject you're interested in, it's just a bunch of interviews covered with B-roll, and they're a lot of fun to make. So like I said, there are endless possibilities when it comes to public access television. Then, so our upcoming Producers Club workshops. These are subject to change because we are hoping to get, we for sure are going to have one, and I'm hoping a second special guest this year for our producer clubs. I have an audio friend of mine that he said that he is available, or he wants to come out and teach an audio demo, but I don't know if it's going to be the next one, the April one, because he's got some things going on. So we might swap the documentary filmmaking one and the audio one, possibly. But we're going to do an audio demo, documentary filmmaking, set design, so different ways that you can design your set in the studio here. A lighting demo, which is another one that we're going to have a special guest for. And then, again, like last year, we're going to have our end of the year party, which will be the first Thursday in December. So, cool.
So yeah.
Any final questions on anything?
Would it be possible to send out calendar reminders for all those dates so we can add them to our Google Docs?
Sure. Yeah. Can I do calendar reminders via Google? How do I do
Or on your Google Calendar or something like that.
Okay.
And then send just connections to, I think you just put us in our email addresses, it should come up and we give an option, we'd accept it and
Oh,
put
sure,
it on our
sure.
own calendars.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, I think I could do that.
Okay.
I'll try to remember to do that. Also, if you're on Facebook, follow BCAT. Somewhat recently got a Facebook, like last summer, and I make events on there for all of our Producers Club events. So you can, click on there that you're going to the event, and then it'll give you reminders. Facebook will give you a reminder when the time comes. And I also post a lot of stuff on there, like tips and tricks. That I find from various sources, film and video sources and stuff. So follow us on Facebook, please.
And this slides or PowerPoints available online? Available online?
It's not available online. It's available in your hand right there. But I could
read that.
I could probably put it online. You can't read it? I'm sorry.
I think if there is an archive for all this presentation.
Yeah, the
nice.
previous ones that aren't online. I could put this one online. Yeah.
I don't see why not.
Yeah. I mean, it's just in our Google
People
Docs.
did
so-
not come, did not show up.
Yeah.
Back to-
Well, and this video will go up on our YouTube channel and probably our actual channel, BCAT 16 as well.
Nice,
So,
yeah.
and I could even give it to you if you want to put it
Yeah,
on yours.
yeah, absolutely.
And I'll post it to like our Facebook and everything. So also follow us on YouTube. So people can go back and watch this video over again. You guys could if you want. So, and if anyone wants a DVD copy of it, I'm happy to make a DVD for you. So.
My final thoughts are, when you're developing a show, it can be really overwhelming. So the first step I would recommend is to just like relax and sit down and not try to do too much. At first, come up with what the focus of your show is, and then think about how long you want it and what kind of things that you want to do, like segments. Think about that structure. Think about how things connect to each other. Do you want a fun gag at the beginning and have a host, or do you want to just jump right into the history of something? So the planning part, though, I can't emphasize this enough. The planning is what's going to make the rest of the shooting and doing everything much easier. Because it can get overwhelming if you just jump into it, start shooting stuff, and suddenly you get lost in tons of video and tons of audio, and you spend days sifting through stuff. So that's why it's important to have a plan in your head and then tweak that as you go through. Maybe you come up with a new concept.
Yeah. Well, and like Brian said too, learn, and things are always changing in this industry, and you can continue to learn things. But especially when you're starting out, come to these Producers Club events. Once you become certified in the classes, it's available for you to use whenever you want. Well, whenever it's available, you can come here and just practice with this stuff as much as you want before you're, ready, or until you're comfortable to actually start doing your show. Play around with this stuff all you want. Check out cameras and just go walk around the street with them or something, or go interview strangers on the street. I don't know, just play around with this stuff. Even if you don't ever do anything with the footage, just get comfortable with it.
Maybe you guys don't know, but in shows, people are riding in the car and you see cars come behind and so on. Do you know anything how they do that? Are they really in the car?
Yeah, how you mount cameras onto a car?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nowadays they are. If you look at old sitcoms from like the 80s and 90s, it's faked. It's shot in a studio with a green screen behind
Not
it.
always, they used to put them on a trailer and pull them behind a trailer.
Okay, or that too. Well, it's pretty obvious when you watch some of those older shows which one's the background's not real, because it just doesn't like match up with what they're doing. Like the person might turn left and the background doesn't actually like turn with the car or something like that.
Which is cool.
Yeah, which is cool.
But nowadays the cameras are they're able to capture the detail so much better that you can mount. Especially the cameras are getting smaller all the time too. You can mount a GoPro on the dashboard of the camera or something like that, or dashboard of the car. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it nowadays. It reminds me of a behind-the-scenes thing I watched recently of the movie Atomic Blonde. I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm not super interested in the movie, but except for the fact that it looks the way they shot it looks amazing. There's a scene where they're being chased by some bad guys or whatever, and they used a combination of green screen and being pulled behind a trailer and actually driving this car, like all combined together. And they made it in a way where I don't know if it was actually done in a single shot or if they just edited it together to make it look like a single shot. But the camera like moves like in and out of this car, and it like goes through the moonroof and all this stuff, and it's just like an unbelievable shot the way that they did this. It's incredible. So
There's a couple cuts, but it's
yeah,
it's
couple
done
cuts.
so well you can't tell.
You can't tell, right? So it all depends on, you know, there's a ton of different ways that you could do it nowadays, but it's a good question.
That's a really good question.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How well will it work if you're trying to mix things we shoot with the good cameras, and if we just have some really awesome video that was shot on an iPhone? It's like, can you put that together and get it to look good enough, cutting between, or?
Well, so if you're using your phone as, you know, let's say you're doing a multi-cam shoot with like 2 cameras and then you're using your phone as a third camera, it's not going to blend that well together, to be honest. If you use it, let's say you're just out in an event and like suddenly something really funny happened or something cool happened and all you have on you is your phone, that's where then, like we mentioned, where if your host could be in the studio saying, oh, our producer was out at this event the other day and, you know, captured this footage with their phone or whatever, and then you can like cut to that. And when you cut things together that way, it's not quite as jarring. But I definitely would not use your camera as like a third camera with like 2 of these like professional cameras next to it, because it is going to look different. And even professional cameras, if you've got you know, a multiple camera shoot and each camera is a different brand, or, you know, some are older than other ones, even that's not going to cut together super well.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, you want to usually shoot on the same frame rate. 30 frames per second is generally the standard. I think with iPhones, and I'll tell you my story, but I dropped my camera off a water tower once, and I used my iPhone to go up to the top and shoot 4K video, and it actually turned out really well because my phone can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second. So in post, when I was mixing it into other video that was shot 4K 30 frames per second, they blended together just fine. But to Ben's point, there is a definite image quality difference because obviously the sensor size on a phone is not going to be as good as a professional level camera, right? So the way to work around some of that stuff too is by doing what's called color grading and manipulating how that works. So if you have you know, a certain style and you just cut between shots, maybe they're not all of the same quality, but if you do it fast enough, you can kind of make it look nice. You know, it's not so jarring.
Yeah.
You do that. But we can talk offline too about more specific issues. Anyway, anything else, guys?
Good question.
This is great.
Yeah, you guys have some really
Thank
good
you.
questions.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, why were you asking about the cameras on a car? Are you interested in doing that type of show, or is
No.
it? Oh,
Just curious.
Okay, just curious. Okay.
We have a GoPro here.
Yeah.
You could hook one up if you guys
Yeah.
want to.
Well, somebody made a video of me, and it was just it was me and someone else. It was a comedy, but there was a high school guy that does this stuff that you're doing. But he attached a camera to the wheel, or he attached a camera onto the car.
Yeah.
It was supposed to. My limo was a major player in the show.
Yeah.
I was just amazed, you know, and it was smooth.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, Ben brings up a good point with GoPros. GoPros are at this point now where you can use them to, I mean, if you get a bunch of them, like I know that Boyd, but other people have used up to like 12 of these things and positioned them in all different angles, and then hit record on all of them, and then shot something like a house burning down, and you don't want to be inside of it, obviously. but you'll get all these different angles of how it starts, how it spreads in the house, how, you know, how things work out. So depending on your resources and how, you know, creative you want to get, you can really use GoPros in a really neat
Can
way.
you use GoPros for a third camera somewhere?
Oh,
yeah, I've done it before. Yeah, I've used it as a wide.
cameras
I've
here.
used it as the wide shot, the middle wide shot before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
It is. They do look a little bit different. Again, like, you know, mixing them with other types of video production cameras, it's going to be a little bit different of a shot. But generally, you usually can do some color grading enough to make it look, you know, fairly similar. But you know, I would say that if the shot looks drastically different, and there's not much you can do to correct it, I probably wouldn't use the shot myself. But if you're able to get it to match up, you know, enough on like a live shoot, then.
I like that. Sometimes if you're doing music like rock music and you have a GoPro and it just doesn't look like the other cameras, who cares? It can add. It can add to the excitement of it,
Right.
especially if you have a gal or a guy with a GoPro in with the band, you know, getting real close-ups. Hey, anything goes, I think.
This isn't something that you know, we have the resources to do here, but just something that I thought was really awesome that I saw done with the GoPro before. I believe it was produced by Red Bull, so that, you know, tells you how much money they have. But it was of a streetcar going through, I think, San Francisco, the streets of San Francisco, well, it was like, you know, it was a Red Bull rally car or whatever. They had the streets closed off specifically for the shoot, but they had these GoPros set up on this like track that would bend. It made like a U-bend, and they would have like 20 of them or more on this rack. And then when this car would come around this corner, they would take a frame from each camera that was like one frame ahead of the next one, and they would freeze frame it. The car comes in and it freezes, and then it looks like the camera is swinging around this car, and then it plays again, and the car speeds off. Just incredible, the things you can do with these cameras these days. It's unbelievable. I should try to dig that video up.
That technique is actually what's in The Matrix, if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah.
That's exactly how they do that kick where she jumps up and kicks the guy in the chest. They set up, I think, something like that, like maybe 16 cannons, and it was all just snap, 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 snap.
Yep.
And then they rotate the shot using that technique. But that's super cool. I didn't realize Red Bull did that too.
It's not a
incredible.
cheap thing to do.
No, it's not. Yeah.
No, I've done it in commercials. It's not.
Right.
Not. You have to have specific setups. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, that pre-planning process. Anyway. All right. Well,
All right.
anything
Thank
else?
you.
Otherwise,
Thank you.
yeah. Thanks
Thank you
for
guys
coming
for
out,
coming.
guys.